How's it going? It's Jake. Today I'm going to be talking about a refugee crisis that's currently occurring around the world. Right now we have a record set of 40.8 million people that are internally displaced throughout the countries. Now what I mean by internally displaced, the refugees that actually flee and they contain themselves inside their own country so they don't cross their country's border lines. So what this really means is that the record set of 40.8 million refugees that are actually internally displaced are not accounting for the millions and millions of refugees that have fled the country already to go live in refugee camps that are provided from northern countries such as Syria to Turkey or Syria to other countries that are in Europe. A study of the Norwegian Refugee Council and the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center have actually found an average of 66,000 people per day fleeing their homes back in the year 2015. Now the Secretary of NRC, General Jan Egeland, stated, "It is the equivalent of the combined populations of New York City, London, Paris, and Cairo grabbing what they can carry, often in a state of panic and setting out on a journey filled with uncertainty." Now 4 large cities from 4 different countries have been used as a representation to provide an example of how large the population of refugees has increased. About 8.6 million of the internally displaced people had fled due to conflict. Around 4.8 million that came from Africa and the Middle East. A source from Eurostat has stated that Syria is one of many countries that have actually applied for asylum in the EU. The description of claiming for asylum is actually having the protection granted by a nation to someone who has left their native country as a political refugee. Now, applying for an asylum in the EU is not all too easy. An asylum seeker would have to arrive to a country of the EU and actually find an official immigration center. From there, the immigration center takes their fingerprints and they store them in a Eurodac database. Once the fingerprints are processed, officials can determine which member state will ultimately examine the asylum application. The decision can rest upon multiple factors. Well, 1, the asylum seeker has a family member in an EU member state, or the person has a visa or residence permit, or whether the person has entered the EU legally or illegally. And then from there, the EU countries are obligated to provide the asylum seekers harmonized standards of reception, which is basically the basic essentials of life, while the decision is being made for the process of the application. The process is obviously continued along the way, and a lot of people choose this route to become refugees because it's basically providing a life for them. Here's a visual image of the summarized process to apply for the asylum of the EU. And now I can see why a lot of people decide to choose and become refugees to leave their country rather than staying in the country because of conflict, internal conflict. With that being said, obviously it's not the refugees' fault because of internal conflict, but because internal conflict increase, that becomes refugee count increase. And that turns to a rapid amount of refugees coming into the countries of the EU and diminishing the resources that are provided at a rapid pace. The resources will eventually deplete to a minuscule amount, leaving the refugees to go to other countries if their process to the asylum is denied. And this just turns into a country hopping from one refugee to another refugee. The refugee count is increasing from day to day, and there could be many solutions to this issue, but my personal solution is population control. What I mean by population control is to actually have a limit to the offspring production to people around the world. Of course, there's going to be certain stipulations due to twins, triplets, or quadruplets, but I believe that everyone should have a certain amount of offspring produced in order to help this world. Eventually, the overproduction of people are going to overpopulate this world. With the overpopulation of this world, there's not going to be any more places to live on, and just more land being torn down. And that's just going to turn people into migrants or refugees just to look for a place to live because there's no more land to live on. With population limitation, I believe that it can actually help with the issues that are occurring around this world. It may reduce the amount of resources being consumed. It may reduce the amount of land that's being destroyed for homes. And in all, it can help the world monitor all the people that are living on it.